Good morning, everyone. The older I get, the more I appreciate the fact that grandchildren are a consolation prize for getting old. A few days from now, my wife and I will meet our fourth grandchild, a little girl, and we're absolutely thrilled. It's our youngest daughter, having a daughter. And it's such a joy to watch our family grow. But at the same time, I'm concerned. I'm concerned for my grandchildren's future and for the future of our country. My generation, the baby boomers, is leaving behind a bulging bag of excrement. Now, I use the word excrement because it's a serious word and this is a serious issue, but you all know that I mean shit. My generation, the baby boomers, is leaving behind for the grandchildren a bulging bag of shit with no clue as to how they're going to handle it, just leaving it behind. And I think we have to start talking about how we're going to handle it. Because instead of a modern and safe highways and bridges and water and sewer systems, we have a deteriorating and dangerous public infrastructure that threatens whole communities when things fail. Instead of an equitable economy and a colorblind society, we have created vast disparities in our society that undermine social harmony. Every year, more than 100,000 people in the United States suffer a gun wound. Almost half of them die. Then there's climate change. We just sit on our hands and watch it all happen. Finally, there's the national debt. In 1968, when my generation came of age, the national debt was less than $1 trillion. It was like 700, 800 billion. Today, the national debt is $22 trillion and counting. Every minute, and I've done the arithmetic and I've erred on the side of caution, every minute as we sit here talking, more than $4 million are put on the grandkids' credit card. Neither political party seems concerned about the debt we're creating. Neither political party has a plan. Public opinion supports broad support for all these issues that I'm raising, yet nothing happens. And why? We're fighting a culture war in this country. It's red versus blue, urban versus rural, us versus them. Our divisions have produced a political crisis, and in turn, that has created political paralysis. If it's an important issue, it won't get handled by Congress. They simply can't get together. They can't agree upon anything. And through our neglect and our indifference, the boomers have created one hell of a mess for our grandchildren. It's going to require years of hard work, patience, and cooperation for them to untangle the mess that we are leaving behind. We need something to revive our national character and unite us as a country. We once had empathy and respect for one another. That's gone. It's an old-fashioned thing. The only question is, how do we get it back? Historically, in America, it's been the military that was able to cut through cultural, economic, and geographic divides and forge a strong sense of national character. Anyone who has served in the military knows that when all your energy and every waking hour is focused on getting a certain goal done, when you're all through, you have a different perspective on life and a different perspective on the people around you. Best example I can give of that in terms of what a regimented life and changes can come about in a person is my own son, Ethan. This was a kid when if you went into his room, you'd find pennies, nickels, dimes, and dirty socks all about his room. But you wouldn't find any quarters. This was a kid who was real careful about saving his quarters because on Saturday afternoon, he knew he was going to get to play Pac-Man, and he needed a quarter for the machine. As my son progressed and he got into high school, my wife and I had to confess that we had permitted him to start school too early. And As he got into senior year, he got accepted to Villanova. My wife and I convinced him that he needed a gap year, that he should take a year off in between college and high school and do something productive, something that will help mature him. Well, he joined the Air National Guard, and it was one of the best moves anyone could have made. He went from loving to shoot hoops and play video games to loving the regimentation of being part of a group and learning to work with others. I can still recall the first telephone call he made to us after 4 weeks of basic training. He said to me, "Dad, I figured it out." And I said, "What?" He said, "I have to adapt to the world. The world won't adapt to me." And there was such progress just in those 4 weeks. But he went on to get a fair amount of military training. When he graduated from Villanova, 9/11 occurred shortly thereafter. He was called up on active duty for a fair amount of time. He served time in Qatar. He eventually became an analyst for the FBI and has for the 15 years. He's been a special agent. Now, without the gap year and without exposing him to the military, I'm not sure that his career would have gone the way it did. Frankly, I don't think it would, and he thinks the same thing. Now, I'm not suggesting that the military is for everybody. I'm not suggesting bringing back the draft. That's not where I'm headed at all. What I'd like to do is to take the best aspects of the military and try to relate them to civilian society. Months ago, as I was thinking about our culture war and how the hell do we end it, I asked myself, why not a national civilian program? Why not a mandatory 2-year program where everyone receives regimental training, then they receive training in a particular career field, followed by hands-on community service across the nation. Israel, Finland, and a fair number of nations have mandatory military service. I'd like to suggest mandatory civilian service. We would be the first. And I'd like to try to give you an idea of how it could look and why it would make a difference. Everyone would grow up knowing that between the ages of 18 and 25, they will owe our country 2 years of public service. And no one will receive an exemption except someone who has a severe disability that requires a fair amount of care. Everyone will be obligated to serve, and if your parents are wealthy, that doesn't qualify as a disability. Everyone will serve. And back up, I want to ask, I think there's nothing wrong with owing 2 years of your life to this country. The two most important things that happen to you are who you're born to and where. Being born here, despite our nation's divisions and problems, being born in this country compared to the rest of the country is like winning the lottery. And 2 years of service is not a lot to ask of people. Some will start after high school, some will start after college, but after 2 years, they will all have a life-changing experience, a bank account, and a resume. And if we use computer algorithms, we can bring together very diverse groupings. I mean, I envision somebody from Atlantic City bunking and relating to somebody from San Francisco, people from Fairbanks, Alaska, with people from Miami, people from Hawaii, with people from Georgia. This is a very big country, and people live in sections and regions, and they never get to know anybody from any place else other than their neighbors and their friends. And we're kind of isolated, and we've permitted that to happen. That I think if we were to go in this direction, that young people would respond positively. And I say that because I do work with young people on a frequent basis, and I'm satisfied if they're equipped properly, they'll handle the future quite skillfully. They'll be fine, but we have to equip them. Now, after initial training, people would be assigned to projects that match their skill sets or interests. The infrastructure is a very big deal to me. Flint, Michigan still doesn't have clean water. Philadelphia, Boston, Chicago, any of the old cities, they have water systems and sewage systems and the pipes installed in the ground 100 years ago and more. It's a huge headache waiting to happen. I'm one of those geeks who read peer-reviewed engineering studies. And you need to know, our nation's public infrastructure is really scary. It's in bad shape. And so I think with the right training, our young people could solve many of these infrastructure problems. They would design innovative construction plans, they would operate sophisticated equipment, and they would do the required labor. And as climate change accelerates, there will be more communities hit by severe weather. And there will be an unfulfilled need for people to provide emergency preparations and disaster recovery. Many rural communities and urban neighborhoods have fallen on hard times. We can build community centers. We can restore parks. We can demolish dangerous and dilapidated buildings. But these communities need our help. We can create a beautiful public art to inspire pride in the community. We can rejuvenate national parks and restore state parks. We can provide health and nutrition services for isolated communities. There are many communities across our nation where there's simply no access to a hospital and limited access to reliable care. Those communities need our help. I believe there is so much good work to be done that we'll never have a shortage of projects. And we'll see serious benefits as a nation very soon. And I think when people witness their fellow Americans benefiting from other Americans' labors, I think it'll spark an enthusiasm, and people will see different people from different parts of the country. But I believe that mandatory universal public service, the important thing about it isn't building things so much as it is building character and boosting our social capital. If we bring our young people together from across the nation, that will unleash talents, energy, and creativity like nothing we've seen. And I believe it also, through working together, it would create an unshakable bond. They would have a shared rite of passage, which would engender empathy and respect. And we, the people, would have a newfound meaning. We can shrink the definition of them and expand the definition of us. Now, I know someone has a question, which is, how the hell are you going to pay for all this? Well, despite our national debt, we remain the richest nation on earth by far. I'd argue that how can we not pay for this? This is this is a first step towards ending our culture war, but I believe it's an important one. Now, we would need to amend the United States Constitution to do this. And I know that sounds ambitious, and it is. But I also know that in the not too distant past, we did something like this. In the 1930s, and I'm going to spark some people's memories, in the 1930s, during the Great Depression, we had a program called the Civilian Conservation Corps, got known as the CCC. The CCC was a big part of FDR's New Deal programs. The CCC put 3 million men to work building things that benefited our entire nation. We had the CCC to thank for the National Park Service. They built it along with many state and local parks. Not long ago, my wife and I were on vacation. We were driving on the Skyline Drive in vacation. That links up with the Blue Ridge Highway in North Carolina, almost 500 miles, all built back in the 30s by the Civilian Conservation Corps. During their 9 years, those men, in addition to building things, planted trees, built park headquarters and lodges, cleared and maintained roads and hiking trails. Truth is, in this country, there are parks that have had no major assistance since the CCC. The program, unfortunately, had to end when World War II began. But it's never too late to try again, because this time we need to include both rural and urban America. There are people in communities that need our nation's help, and this program can bring it to them. Now, universal public service is not a magical cure. I don't believe in panaceas. But my generation, the boomers, we have really screwed up big time. But we can create a better foundation for those who follow us. And in doing so, we will begin the next great chapter in American history, when our young people come together, and when they do, they will learn that everyone has a part to play in keeping our nation strong, free, and a beacon of hope, and that as Americans, there is far more that unites us than divides us. Thank you.